extra. You know, you might clean up, do a little more with your hair, that kind of thing. So stress is, we absolutely have to have it. It pushes us to our best abilities and our best performances. But it's when it is chronic, when we don't know how to use it and then turn it off. That is when it gets into trouble. And humans are the only ones that the stress response just continues and continues and continues and nags and nags and nags at it. It's like all those things that just run through your brain that cause you to go, I don't know, you know, is Tricia going to yell at me today? Did she told me to come to my office? Am I going to get fired? All that stuff that goes round and round and round and round. That is not productive. That the cortisol response just continues and continues and continues, and that is what damages us. So through the lectures that we've had in the past couple of months, we've learned some techniques to lower that stress response if we feel it coming on. Remember, if a tiger comes through the door, I want your stress response to kick in. I want you out. You know, we're going to run behind Lindsay and let him take it, right? You know? But all this niggling and nagging, what my daughter calls first world problems, you know, did that, you know, I'm so worried that I have too much sodium and now I'm going to weigh too much at the doctor's. You know what? It's okay. Call and reschedule your doctor's appointment. That's what I would do. That's what I would do. So, but all that is non-productive, we just need to be able to use the stress response appropriately and turn it off when it is damaging to us. And, you know, kind of like the Serenity Prayer, we need the wisdom to know the difference. So we're kind of wrapping it all up. We've got a lot of things. I had so many. Let me make sure I get. Whoops, is it that way? There we go. I had so many little notes. But some of these things, realizing that you are in charge of yourself, no one else. It's all, you know, you are the center of this. And that, yes, you can let go of anger and guilt. You can let go of worry.
We're getting you a clicker, Lisa.
Oh, okay. That's all right. I can click. That you may need to revisit your past. That's part of the resilience. That even sometimes, as we learned in the Kauai study, that people who have had horrific events in their past had, those who had come out of them with resilience actually were living longer, healthier lives. And that just because you've had some struggles, that we actually know that people who have had some struggles and come out of it, they are actually live longer and healthier. So it's not that you ignore or bury the past. Sometimes you revisit it and realize that you've made some choices and come through, and that's, we call that resilience. And then accepting yourself. I liked these from the Buddha. I was going to take off on this one. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. No one can make you happy. You are in charge of your own happiness. So also know that if you are with an unhappy person, you cannot make them happy. Oh, my second ex-husband. So that it always works the reverse, that if someone is down, it brings you down. You can never bring the down person up. So this is something to really think about in terms of relationships, or, you know, let's say it's not a marriage, but if there's a coworker or a relative that's kind of that downer, you may want to limit your time and exposure to that, because they will only bring you down. You cannot bring them up, because they have to find the happiness within, and it's a little difficult to point out to someone who is that down. Sometimes it just needs some professional guidance. Make peace with ourselves. And recognize when you're not at peace. I liked that one. Recognize when you're, because sometimes it becomes so ingrained that our brains run on and on and on and on, that until we stop and take a moment of mindfulness, we don't even know how much we're running on. So that's important. I had my great uncle, I mean, he was old, and I remember this joke. He must have been in his 80s. He used to say this all the time. He'd say, my mother made me a homosexual. And then the friend says, if I got some yarn, would she make me one too? I mean, that was his hysterical joke that he told, and the whole thing about make you something. You know, you can't make anyone anything. So you do what you do, and then they choose. They choose. You can't make a person happy. You do what you do, and then you choose whether or not to be happy. So again, here's some of the things that you can do that might get you started. Does anyone have any other things they could add to this?
Lisa?
Yes.
I was going to say, I noticed that your second bullet is focusing on your greatest strengths, and that's something that our organization does right now.
Mm-hmm.
It encourages some staff, some departments are doing the strength finders. So it's and some of us did it a while back, but it's always nice to kind of revisit those strengths and focus on strengths rather than weaknesses,
right.
and build from there.
Right, because you know a lot of let's say those group self-help seminars, they start with, oh, write down 5 things you like about yourself, and sometimes that's really tough for people. It is very uncomfortable. We've been sort of socialized that you don't toot your own horn or you don't brag. But it really is important, because it's going to come around in the next couple of slides where sometimes, I call it fake it till you make it. If you're struggling, sometimes you need to draw on the fact that you do have these strengths and present that face, especially if you're going through a struggle time. So definitely enumerating them, having that little go-to mantra in your mind that you know, it sounds like that Saturday Night Live skit. You know, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. If it is as simple as that, that's fantastic, because you actually can rewire your brain patterning. So if you tend to be like, if our brains are, what's my little, if down here is sort of depression, and because of decreased serotonin, and you keep those affirmations, you just keep saying it, it's like smiling. We've learned that just smiling, even if you're kind of faking it, that it helps rewire your brain, that you can kind of get up into here. And then sometimes your brain can relearn how to stay in a better groove. I'm not saying that it will end depression, but sometimes it's part of the prescription. So again, and then if you have those strengths, you can use them and revisit them to help you to feel more positive, that confidence. Getting excited, right? Getting excited about things. Maybe you want to become less excited. So maybe, because maybe you're a reactive, excited person, and you tend to run up here. So maybe you have a role model of someone who handles things in a calmer way, and some of those descriptors can help you to remind you. And it will definitely, remember, we're trying to lead to a better quality of life, less of that chronic stress, healthier lifespan, health span that matches your lifespan. So I like this list a lot. That compassion, that can be to yourself. It can also be I think of compassion and that gratitude. These are other things that are sometimes given in a prescription if someone is not feeling peaceful, not feeling at their best. They say, go volunteer, give of yourself. And sometimes even for people who have very little time, money to give, it's still part of that prescription. That you give of yourself, you make sure that you spend time with compassion and gratitude, and that you can change your brain chemistry. And you absolutely will lower that stress. Quietness, turning off the TV, stepping away from your devices, right? And the self-talk. So, right, again, as part of my, I swear, I think that just dovetailed. But this says, stop, breathe, reflect, and choose. This is sort of a little something you can think about if you're in the moment. We all have, we call it PTEM, perceptions, thinking, emotions, and memory. We all, like, again, like I could see this as half full. Someone else sees it as half empty. I mean, we all have, we can see the same thing. It's like, that's turquoise. And then Tricia would say, no, that's baby blue. You know what I'm saying? So we see the same thing. Every one of us perceives it differently because of our emotions, our memories, and our thinking, PTEM. So when all those come together, those form our core beliefs. And then sometimes we get a little stuck in our core beliefs. So this is where, if we want to change sometimes those core beliefs, those cognitive appraisals, if they become negative and destructive, we sometimes have to stop. We have to open ourselves up before we react, right? We take a breath, and then we reflect. Ask yourself the following questions. Is this thought or belief actually true? Am I really the fattest person that the doctor has ever seen because I had some extra salt? You know, am I really the worst mother because my son said, by the way, I hate you for that? I was like, I love you! Because I think I put his keys actually somewhere where I thought it was logical, but then he couldn't find them. So I don't let his outburst get to me. So is it really true? Did I jump to a conclusion? Did I fire the housekeeper because something went missing and I was sure it was her when actually it had just been misplaced? Oops. So can you take a breath? Like I tell my son, it could not have grown legs and walked away. I'm not going to go into this panic. Where are my keys? You know, he's all running around. And it's like, okay, so I just calmly take a breath. That's sort of my mantra with him. It could not have grown legs and walked away. And then I say, can you retrace your steps? So I get him logically thinking, and then the keys turn up. So what evidence for the thought or belief do I have? Is there actual evidence for that? Am I letting negative thoughts balloon out of proportion? My business partner always says, well, Nancy's on vacation, Carolyn's having surgery, we're going to have to cut our pay because all these clients are out. It's like, Carl, every month someone's on vacation. Every month someone's having surgery. In 21 years, this man and I have been business partners, and he's much more the negative and I'm the positive, but he tends to catastrophize. And for 21 years, a business that's been going for 21 years, oh, Carl knows I talk about him all the time. It's just, he said, oh, we're going to fail. It's like, we've been 21 years in business, we're already not failed. So it's like he can't, he just can't get that. But anyway, he tends to balloon things out of proportion. And what would be the worst that would happen? Well, the worst would happen, okay, so we take a pay cut. Clients come back, we reestablish, that's we can live through that. Does it help me to think this way? Actually, I don't know how Carl is still alive. With his brain constantly, he's
Exercise.
just, yeah, he is just, yes, he is absolutely very much in, he's very stress mode all the time. And so whenever I go to these, I have notes, Carl. And it's like, I don't know how he's still alive, but Trisha's right. He is an exerciser. And then what would be the best that can happen? My goodness. Hey, maybe some new clients would come in. Maybe we'll get a raise in pay. So these are ways that you can reframe things or ask yourselves before you are reactive. This is a way to help you be proactive and then come to a conclusion in a more mindful, less stressed way. Yeah, and then you choose. That's the most important thing. Once you've asked those questions, then you choose how you want to react. You're not just reacting or overreacting. You are making a choice to make a mindful decision, not born out of a stress reaction, not born out of that immediate negative core belief that you have possibly established over years and years and years and years and years and years of practice. You've actually chosen possibly to go a different direction. And that's a really big thing when you can catch yourself before that initial reaction comes up. Like Lindsay could come in and he could start telling me about all the technological, and my immediate reaction is to glaze over. I mean, I just kind of go a little like, oh, this is so stressful for me, technology and this kind of thing. But you tell me that my TV is going to be off and I will not get to see my Warriors, I will become a technological genius. Because then it matters to me, and I will wake up and I will make a choice to follow along and follow the steps and call Comcast and get my Warriors back on. So I know, rather than say, oh, I can't, I'm terrible at technology, I know that I can say, sometimes I don't enjoy the technological verbiage. Like, I know you're speaking to me, but it's not understanding. So sometimes I have to say to my kids, I say, wait. And I take that breath, because I'm about to glaze over and I'm about to go in my stress mode, because this is not what I enjoy. I say, wait. Let me take a breath. Let me get all my attention on. So I turn off everything else. And then if my kids show me something and maybe I make some notes, then I was able to change my core belief about myself that I'm terrible at technology and I hate it. So there are examples in your everyday life that you can make a choice. When it comes back to my profession, I hear this all the time, oh, I can't eat breakfast. It's like, well, yes, you can. I mean, but people set up this very negative talk. Oh, I'm not an exerciser. Well, maybe you say, I can't eat breakfast until I've had a glass of water and some quiet time, and I've thought about that I'm going to have something easy. Maybe I can't eat breakfast if I think I have to prepare some gourmet omelet. But maybe if I know that I have leftovers in the refrigerator, maybe I can rephrase it. Maybe I can. I'm not an exerciser. Well, can you walk? It sounds like this is just like your challenge, right? So yes, maybe I'm a walker. And then I have the clients that say, oh, well, walking doesn't count. Oh, yes, it does. So then I have to get them to reframe that, and then I have to get them to stop saying, oh, it was just walking. So first they didn't count it. Now they say it's just, so they're minimizing it. But so they have to embrace it. And sometimes it's housework, and sometimes it's gardening, and sometimes it's dancing, but this is all, it all counts. So when people set up those negative things about not an exerciser, I'm not a breakfast eater, and they're coming to me for help with their chronic diseases, which I know are stress-related, I'm going to try to give them a foundation, right? And the foundation, health-wise, for your stress, the foundation of sleep, activity, nutrition, and then, as we've talked about in the last couple of times, that mindfulness, meditative thought that helps you so that you can, in that moment, stop and possibly make a better decision. And you can definitely stop that cortisol response so that it does not add to the chronic disease of it all. So, compassion and gratitude, the self-talk, absolutely. The meditation, the breathing. We're learning more and more about the effect of nature, how much that helps with our decreasing the cortisol response. So that in the morning, possibly instead of looking at your phone first thing, you look out your window. You make sure that you're getting a nature break, and I don't mean just going to the bathroom, right? But literally that you go, I mean, I know an earthquake drill isn't as much fun, but setting yourself someplace in your house where you can have that quiet place, maybe looking out the window. Tricia and I were talking about, I grew up in the country. My mother has absolutely no shades, no curtains, no nothing. We look out onto farmlands, and my mom talks about how meditative it is because she watches the tractor in the lettuce fields. It is absolutely hypnotic. It is so relaxing. And so I don't like having curtains. I feel claustrophobic with curtains. It's just because of how I grew up. But now, in order to see my warriors, there is some glare, so I do pull my shades, but my side window, which looks out to this most beautiful rose bush and these iris that are just volunteering and are practically as tall as the rose bush, that's never shaded. And so that's always there, and then when the sun is in a certain place, then I turn my shades because I like waking up to the sun. I like, even though I'm on kind of a street, I can still see the hills behind me. I can see lots of trees, and I can look out the side window, and there's my beautiful rose bush. So it's fantastic. It's not quite as fabulous as my mom's house, but it's really helpful. And so if you think about making sure that you have that in your life, I now even get prescriptions from doctors that say this person is deficient in vitamin N, and they mean nature. So be sure that you're getting yourself out and involved in nature. We are living in the most amazing place that year-round we have access. So.
I was just going to mention about one thing about nature, and it is something that I encourage in the Stressless Bingo card that some of you are participating in. And the reason I encourage nature is I think when we feel stressed and overwhelmed, it's very easy to just really zero in on that pressure and that stress. And when you get outside of yourself, and sometimes you don't realize it, but when you go out in nature, you start to realize there's a lot of other things going on besides what's happening in your head. It gets you outside of your head for a little bit. You can see, flowers blooming or wind blowing leaves. Just something can take your mind away, and it's just kind of a nice thing to realize, you know what, this is, there's a lot more going on in the world than these things. Right. They don't need to be built up so much, maybe, or I can handle it. It just kind of takes you away from that feeling.
I'm going to flip it another way because I see this where I live is the Los Gatos Creek Trail, and along the trail are a lot of businesses. And sometimes when I'm out on the trail midday, I will see coworkers walking the trail. They are not they're not, you know, they're just walking on the trail. They are conversing, perhaps collaborating. And I always think that sometimes you can solve the problems of the world out on a walk or a jog or just, and I you know, it just what cracks me up most is that it's always people that probably were not born here that are out using the trail. I don't see many white folk, yeah, on the trail, but people from other countries that it's just such a pleasure to be out and about with, you know, without the cars, and it's just really lovely. And so sometimes a walking consult or sometimes getting out, like Trish said, you get out of your head, that immediate whirling around of all that noise, you get out there. And sometimes I call it, sometimes I tell Carl, I say, you know, just be still. You know, I tell him, just wait. I said, the answer will come to you, because sometimes when you force it, you're just forcing something that can't work. You're just too up here. But if you get that calmness, and for me, a lot of times it's out on the trail or it's out in nature. And trust me, I'm not like, you know, I'm not training for some sort of world record. I'm just out, and it really helps in the answer. It falls into your brain. And so I see a time when more meetings will involve sort of walking and talking, and I really think therapists and psychiatrists will avail themselves of this sort of walking and talking, helping with problems and helping with mild to moderate depression, because we know that it helps. That mild cardio, 40 minutes 4 times a week, can be very effective for mild to moderate depression. So, and when you add the behavioral therapy, it even is more effective. So that's I see that becoming a very nice 2-for-1 in a way for those professions. So any questions on that? Does anyone have any others? Because what all of these do, besides lower the cortisol, is they release serotonin. Yes! I was hoping someone would go there. We call it safe touch. And it has, you know, does anyone have snakes, lizards? Okay. Because it has, yes. No, it has, well, but see, there's a you know, where it's like, I can't stand snakes. Maybe you say, those are not my favorite pets. You know? But in order for them to have the serotonin release and the stress relief, they have to be warm-blooded. So your comfort boa constrictor, which is my laugh, my friend and I were thinking of, you know, when you have your comfort animal on the plane, the boa constrictor, you just think it's just like a neck pillow. Yeah, oh yes, it's just my neck pillow. But in order to have that serotonin release, which is your happy, sleepy chemical, those endorphins, right? The body's endogenous morphine, the natural painkiller, they need to be warm-blooded. Nature releases serotonin, that bright sunlight. Sometimes if it's cold and windy, sometimes just looking out into a bright sunny day from a window, that helps. Laughter. That's the other one that I always think of, is that people need more comedies and maybe a little less. Again, this kind of goes with shutting down the social media, shutting down the TV and that kind of things at a certain point in time. Try not to watch those really stressful medical drama shows, Code Black's coming back. But you know what? I only watch it in the morning. I don't watch it at night because it interferes with my sleep. And we know now that those news, maybe we should only watch the morning news and not in the evening. So kind of think of yourself, if that's interfering with your stress or your sleep, you might need to take a little break from that, especially at night. But things like the pets, the safe touch, aromatherapy. I was after my shower this morning, I was like putting on some lotion. It's like, oh, I noticed it said stress relief, and it says, you know, aromatherapy. So those smells, that touch, you know, things with our senses, the visual with the bright light in our eyes, the safe touch. Massage is another way of doing it. So then what is blocking you? Get ready. I have a list. But this was just so, you know, think about the people you're around. Think about if this comes out of your mouth, especially as a parent. Be careful, you know, that all or nothing, no shades of gray. You know, no, you're wrong. You know, I think of Republican and Democrat. Oh my goodness, Carl. And then the other thing is, if you're not perfect, then you're a failure. I think it was, I want to say might be Mandela, but I think it was Morgan Freeman quoting Mandela. He said, I either win or I learn. So you know, this whole thing about perfection, my goodness, you know, we get so stressed out. My son said, you know, Mom, you know, I'm going to do the community college thing, because you know what, to apply to Irvine, which is kind of where he wants to go, because it has both psychology stuff, which he's interested in, and gaming stuff, which he's interested in. So it's kind of funny. Irvine, he says, what they say is their minimum grade point average to apply to Irvine, 4.7. Oh, 4.7. I don't even know how to do. Oh, it's AP classes. Yeah. That's how you get a 4.7. I'm like.
And you start in freshman year with honors classes.
Yeah.
That's how you'll get a 4.
Yeah. Well, so he's pretty happy not being perfect. So I'm very happy that this kid has sort of an Etch-a-Sketch brain. He might ratchet up, but he shakes himself out, and then it's done. It's gone. It's forgotten. So I love that about him. He should be like an air traffic controller or something, because he's very, very good about that. You know, always one negative thing happens, and then the whole day is ruined, right? So put things. That's overgeneralization, and just because it shouldn't flavor your whole day, right? Not embracing the positive. Someone says, oh, you did such a nice job. I really appreciate how you handled that. Oh, anyone could have done that. It's nothing special. I think especially women, again, it goes back to not being boastful, not bragging, you know, it's not ladylike. Just say, thank you so much. I'm so happy that it worked for you. Jumping to conclusions, Carl, you know, going in for a mole and immediately thinking that it's cancer, he's going to die. Magnifying something or minimizing the positive and magnifying the negative. Things like that. The shoulda, woulda, coulda. Don't should on yourself. Just know that you made a decision, you made a choice. Like we were talking about, you know, sometimes you stop, you take that breath, you reflect, you choose. And if you still really want the chips or the cookie or whatever it is, you make a choice, but you did it mindfully, not because, oh, I had such a hard day at work, and you grab chips and you start eating and you don't even enjoy it. Because sometimes it's okay just to enjoy some chips or a cookie. There's nothing, I mean, if that's the worst thing anyone ever says about me, I'm happy. Yes?
I think it's interesting and worth mentioning too, when you're talking about what blocks, when sometimes it's just like weird, this, I think about it, human nature, like when you go see your significant other, you just want to like purge out everything horrible that happened that day, because this is a person that's going to listen to you, and then you don't realize how that impacts the negativity bias, and then you share that, and it impacts the kind of the next thing that they share on. And so, and when you share a positive thing, and it's kind of funny, so I recognize that I'm really trying hard on that, and then I have to go like, oh, did I tell you that thing happened the other day at work? And it's like, he's like, you didn't tell me this negative thing happened,
Right.
and, or with the car, whatever it was, it's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, and then, so I'm realizing that I'm getting better at it, but it's something that's kind of natural, and my daughter, of course, this wants to focus on drama, and because she's a teenager, and so I'm trying to teach her too.
Because again, I think I told last class this, but like my mother who got a ticket, and my son said, "Oh, Grandma, you shouldn't be speeding." My mother said, "Oh, but that way I wouldn't meet those nice highway patrol officers." So, it's like rather than focusing, like going home and spilling on your significant others all this negativity that gets them all ratcheted up, like you said, you just, oh, yeah, this thing happened and I handled it, and I got to meet this really nice CHP officer, and, it's just, so again, you have the choice of how to perceive it and then how to share it, because you're being mindful about it, and just being mindful enough to know that if you know your significant other, if you share something that it's going to send them off into a stress response, again, maybe you buffer, or maybe you put a positive, P and P, positive first, a negative, and then a positive. So, you say, oh, so the bad news is it's a $150 ticket, but the good news is I can work it off on the computer. Or my mom went and taught. She taught a class, so she got to work it off that way. So you just learn. You just learn. So you have to think about individually. Does anyone have anything that they've learned with themselves? Because Tricia, that's a good one about how to.
You don't even have to say this bad thing. You just say, oh yeah. I forgot to tell you this thing.
Yeah.
And it's just a thing now, because it's like totally over.
Right.
Now it's something,
Right. Anyone else have anything? You're all very mindful. Yeah, this is guilt and anger is where the cortisol response will just keep going and going and going and going and going, and this is where it becomes damaging. So you're not burning down orphanages, right? There's just so little that really, needs to go in here if you're not purposefully running over puppies or something like that. It causes fatigue, and remember, this cortisol wash leads to those chronic illnesses and depression. So examine, be compassionate with yourself. Have you noticed? I watch all these shows where there's usually a therapist involved, like My 600-Pound Life, and they have the most horrific stories. And the therapist now, because we've learned that this is very helpful to acknowledge, say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like we acknowledge that the terrible thing happened to the person. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And then it helps them to then move on. And then we move forward with how are we going to have our behavior be better so we don't just eat 25,000 calories a day and stay in this mode of using food to soothe feelings. So but you have to use warmth, love, and compassion. That's where I think some of the therapist types are getting better at expressing that. And then this goes to that, talk it out, write a letter, make a plan. So when you make a plan, even about something that you're finally willing to look at, maybe from the past, make a plan how to move forward in a more productive way, that lowers that cortisol response, that takes some of that power away. I had one client who came in who needed to lose weight before she was going to have back surgery. And so we had spent an hour, we had written down everything, we had talked about the exercise she could do while even though she was in pain. And then I don't know how it came up, but she said, oh, by the way, I was molested by my stepfather from the time I was 5 years old, and he said if I told, then he'd molest my little sister. And I about fell out of my chair. I took everything we had written and I took it back, and I was lucky I had a card right there. I said, can we call right now and make an appointment with a therapist? She agreed. I was the first person she had ever told. She was in her 60s. And so we called the therapist, got her in. Well, 3 months later, she came back to me. She had not needed surgery. Because if you don't think that these events, these adverse childhood events, they absolutely affect your health, your illness, your fatigue, your depression, your body, they do. And not everything is as dramatic as this patient, where she was finally able to release it and her body was better. But she did not have surgery. She didn't need it. She was out of pain. And so sometimes this type of thing, where it can be difficult to get started, talking about it, writing about it, learning to let it go, learning how to be resilient, it absolutely improves your health. So I know you think, oh, that happened so long ago. It doesn't matter. It does. It does. It affects you going forward. And sometimes it's difficult, but taking that first step to tell someone about it, to tell a professional about it, even that letter that you write but don't send, or to even just make a plan of how you might want to deal with something that is nagging at you. Make a plan.
That's easy to say.
Yeah, I know. It is. I mean, even things, I'm such a big breakfast fan. Even something like eating breakfast. I know it's like, here, eat breakfast. It'll help. $195. Thank you very much. You're cured. But you have to do it. And I know it's not easy. Habits aren't easy. It's not easy to change behavioral habits. It's not easy to change your reaction if you're just used to, oh, here's a Republican, they say this, and I'm a Democrat, so I believe that. It's like, but I tell you, when you're in the service industry, so I have a client who is a big game hunter, not endangered species, but he travels all over the world to find new heads for his room. And he happily shows me the pictures. And this is a nice man. And I'm like, oh. And so then I say, tell me about this. Tell me about your trip. And so I learn. And what I learn is that in case there is the nuclear holocaust or whatever, I am going right to Mel's house because he knows how to survive. And I will glom onto his coattails and I will happily eat anything he happens to kill. But I had to really, because I got into that stress mode, and it's like, he's a nice man. I want to keep him as a client. What am I going to? He has different PTEM around hunting than I do. And that's okay. Doesn't mean I'm going to go hunting, but I can accept the fact that he does. And so that's it's one of my things is instead of the reaction, tell me more. Tell me more. A lot of times with your kids too, where you just like, clean up your room. It's like, tell me more. What's your thinking on that? Like it kind of stalls to give you time, but then they also feel empowered to talk to you. Let go of always being in control. Yes, yes. Tell me more. Don't just react. Yes, and that worry, that stress, we've talked about that. Observe. It's okay to say something like, especially to a significant other, it's like, oh, when I hear the word technology, I get a little squinchy and I glaze over. Can you go really slowly? So sometimes I ask people when I'm dealing with tech people over the phone, I say, just pretend I'm a kindergartner, and that will help me.
Well, I just want to say I think it's an important slide, this one, especially for our organization right now, because there's a lot of things that we can't control, and we're being faced with changes in our staffing and changes with our budgets and our programs, and it's really easy to get really overwhelmed and upset, and the truth is we can't control a lot of it, so we have to move from this moment forward with what we can. And it's really hard. It's really easy to get emotional. I'm like getting emotional right now. But I just think that that piece is really important, is just kind of being able to roll with what we can do, and really kind of look at making it good and making the best out of what we can do today, and feel, for anybody else who's kind of in a different position, I think everyone's impacted, whether people think it or not. Everybody here is impacted right now, and some of us are, jobs are being changed a lot, and some of us not. But we have to roll with that. My job is not impacted, but my husband just lost his job. So, it's impacting, these kinds of things happen. And it's just, you just have to look at it with interest on, life and like doing your best, I guess. The worry part doesn't help. Maybe trusting that you and everyone else are going to be okay.
That you have the wisdom to know what you can control and what you can't. The wisdom to know the difference. Put your focus on the things you can control and give it out to the universe the things you can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. So that's because that worrying over whether the bomb's going to drop, it's, I think of the 50s and all those, duck and cover and all that kind of that stress. It's probably where it all started. But being aware also, that's the first step of knowing that you might need to take a nature timeout. You might need those 3 deep breaths, or you might need to write it down, right? Those are those simple things, a little 3 to 5 minute mindfulness meditation, those 3 deep breaths, writing down, all those things can release that stress response so that it doesn't keep ratcheting up and cause your body harm. So sometimes we can't go for an hour on the trail. Sometimes we didn't get enough sleep to lower our stress response, but we can do those 3 deep breaths. We can write a plan, or we can take a little meditation break to focus ourselves to make better decisions. Did anyone watch The Masters? So they're introducing Ricky Fowler and John Ram. I watch way too much TV. And you could see John Ram, he closed his eyes, and the announcer says he's visualizing the front 9. He closed his eyes, and he's visualizing how he wants to play the front 9. So this is an elite athlete, and he was using that imagery, that mindfulness, to focus himself before a gallery of thousands of people and a television audience of millions. He teed off. So I just think it's interesting that we're seeing it more in elite athletes, actors, actresses. For peak performances, people are taking that moment to center themselves. And here we talked about this. Maybe it's time we might need to revisit your past to understand why things might not be working. This is, again, if you have an employee assistance program, there is help available. Yeah. What's your baggage? Accept and be happy. We've talked about this. What do you need to do to let it go? One of the things that a little article talked about, we were talking about Monday morning, reframing that I hate Monday kind of feeling. Sometimes on Friday, before you leave, you take that moment, take 10 minutes, take a quiet, meditative moment, and visualize where you're leaving off on Friday and what you're going to need to start with on Monday. You can make some notes. And so then, when you leave work, a little bit of transition time, because work is still with you, so you allow yourself a little time for work to still permeate your thoughts. But then, once you're stepped through your door, you've already told people in that 10-minute time before you left work that I will be unavailable, I will be not checking my emails or my texts or my whatever phone for work-related messages until this time on Monday morning. It is okay to do that. And so you need to have that balance. You need to step away and have your life and not have all this other stuff. You'll do better on Monday coming into it fresh. If you look at the word recreation, break it apart. Recreation. And so if you let yourself have some of that recreation on your time off, you will come back to work better energy, better thoughts, your mind less stress, better able to be your best type of employee. So recreation is not a waste of time. It is absolutely vital to the rest of your life, doing it the best way. Right? We've talked about this. I would also add, have breakfast. Because
that was on every slide.
Yeah, I need you to have the raw materials. And so if we start from the night before, which is your restorative sleep, and then we have a consistent wake-up time, that seems to be, even if the nighttime, maybe you went and saw a show, or maybe you went and exercised, or something like that. So your nighttime doesn't have to be as routine as that wake-up time. We've learned that for best health, it's the wake-up time, keeping it consistent, and then having breakfast. If you tend to be highly excitable, do you think Fruit Loops is your best choice? So we talk about having fiber, fat, and protein rather than something that's just quick energy. Maybe, yes, caffeine is my favorite drug, but possibly if you find yourself a little too, maybe you go to a 50-50 blend. I got my guy to do a 50-50 blend, and he didn't even notice the difference. He's not drinking more because it was half caffeinated. So just think about that. Or maybe you like the warm water and it doesn't even need the caffeine. Maybe you can have the tea or some hot lemon water. So just think about it, because if you tend to be like this, things like caffeine and added sugar are probably not your friend. So they talk about having that fiber, fat, and protein. Keeps you going longer. Protein foods, remember, make the neurotransmitters. Carbohydrate foods release them. So I'm not saying not to have carbohydrates, but the higher fiber ones. Stress is your friend. Peak performance, right? Your best efforts until it's chronic. And then it is disease promoting. So again, knowing the difference, knowing how to turn it off so that you can have your health span match your lifespan. All right, thank you very much. And here's the EAP information.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. Good job, everybody.
There is a pink sheet if you could fill it out.